Satnam, beautiful Sovereign Sisters, and welcome to this week's Sovereign Sisterhood Movement Podcast with my sister Elvira and I. Today, I need to take a deep breath before we introduce this week's topic because this week's generational healing topic can absolutely bring up a lot of emotions, especially with the state of consciousness of the world. What I'm referring to is that today, Elvira and I are going to be discussing and breaking down how to break the cycle of addiction in our lineages. And addiction is not just an individual struggle, as we all know, it's a generational wound with roots in unresolved pain, ancestral guilt, and even our genetic makeup. So, together, we're going to explore this topic through the lens of the holistic approach to healing. We're going to look at some of the scientific findings, our own personal journeys to uncover these practical tools to heal these patterns at the root cause. I want to start and preface by saying that you do have the power to disrupt the cycles of addiction that no longer serve you and your lineage. And whether you are going through addiction yourself or you are a caregiver of someone in your family that's going through addiction, we see you, we honor you, and we welcome you to open your heart to today's podcast episode. Elvira, how are you, my beautiful friend?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you.
So everyone, please wish Elvira in the comments a huge happy birthday because today she is turning an age that is very sacred, that is also, I feel like this is where the Mayans, I think when I first started to get older and older, like in my 20s and 30s, I used to get like so upset at the ages that I turned. Like I was like, I don't want to get older. And then I remember reading this book of the Mayans that talked about how we truly get into our emotional maturity until like we're in our 50s, like 55. They talked about that number. I was like, oh, I got nothing to worry about. So I
Yeah,
hope
when I turned 19, I remember I was very emotional and I was crying, and my aunt was there, one of my aunts. So she never forgot. She's like, "Why are you crying?" I'm like, "I'm turning 19." And she ever since then, she texted me this morning. She's like, "Elvirita, don't cry." I'm like,
she's
"I'm
also
good, I'm
pregnant.
good, I'm good."
But doesn't it get easier as you get older? I feel like it gets easier,
I think we become more grateful.
right? That,
Yes.
that's the right word too. For me, it was 30. When I turned 30, I freaked out. Like I was like, it's the end of the world. I don't want to be 30. And then when I turned 40, I was like, oh, I like this. So I'm looking forward to the ages as we come instead of being afraid of them. But anyhow, let's talk about happy birthday to you. And
Thank
let's
you.
talk about what we're going to talk about today. So I think first and foremost, why don't we start with defining what addiction even is? Because a lot of people, when they think of that word addiction, the first thing that they think of is like, oh, a drug or alcohol. And I do want to preface is, for me, my struggle was addiction to alcohol for a very long time, absolutely rooted in generational wounding. But there's several types of addictions. Wouldn't you agree? Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing that can be looked at as addictions where maybe some people don't even realize?
Food,
Oh,
food, social media, Netflix. There's so many. There's so many. Even porn. I hear there's so many generational stuff that um I think we're so unfortunately we don't want to feel, or it's too painful to feel or deal with whatever it is we're going through, that
yeah.
whatever we can um just disconnect from taking our minds off whatever's going on.
That's so true because all of it is a coping mechanism. That's what it
Yeah.
is. It's you're coping with life. You're coping when you look at somebody who's been addicted to a substance, or like you said, food. I think a lot of people don't realize how easy it is to become addicted to food.
Or even sex too, like that.
Oh yeah, the corn. Yeah, that is a big thing that males are.
Not just that, I think people there's a disconnection even with your partners. You can't connect with anybody. So you know,
Yeah, and I think because of that, it's the intimacy issue, right? And when we have a lot of generational trauma patterns, or where we were talking about last week, right? The inner child. So if you all missed the episode on the inner child, I highly suggest you go listen to that also because it leads up to what we're talking about here. One of the things we were talking about last week in the episode, and I'll link it below, is the inner child is this aspect of ourselves that doesn't feel seen, has felt neglected, maybe has gone through childhood abuse, trauma, right? And because of that, there's a pain. So then what do? We find coping mechanisms. That's what addiction is. That's why we said last week, not why the addiction, but why the pain, because the coping mechanism becomes eating. And I love to fast a lot, like fast a lot. That sounds like weird, like a paradox, you know? But like once a month, I'll choose, 3 days out of the month to fast. And makes me so aware of how much I use food to deal with my stress. So I'll be like working on something and then I stress out about what I'm working on and I get up and I'll go grab the food. And that's why I do the food, not the only reason, there's many other health reasons to do that. But that's one of the reasons. It's like, my goodness, these coping mechanisms. And the whole thing about childhood trauma, especially, and it is the most common generational trauma pattern, is that we develop all kinds of fancy coping mechanisms to do this. It's not just, for me, it was alcohol for a long time. But I remember Dr. Gabor Mate, our favorite doctor on
Yeah.
trauma informed, he was addicted to shopping. And he said
Yeah.
that at one point he was in the surgery room, like he was supposed to be there taking care of someone, and he had to leave to go buy whatever he was addicted to buying. And I thought
Wow.
that's bizarre. And think about food too. Like addiction with alcohol, you could be a functioning alcoholic. Like I
Yes.
was a very high performing functioning alcoholic. Food, you see so many overweight people, and right away we judge. We're like, look at why doesn't this person take better care of herself? Why does she overeat? Why does she? Because it's the pain. It's
Yes.
it's not a conscious choice that we're making. So coping mechanisms is a perfect way to exemplify what addiction is to help us not feel so ashamed. Now, in my lineage, I don't know about yours, but in my lineage, there was just a lot of addiction. A lot. Whether it was alcohol was a big one. Alcohol was definitely a big one in my grandfather's side and my um not so much in the women's side. I didn't see it as much. I feel like I was a pioneer for that, probably, but it was definitely in the male, which affected, of course, the women in my family. And for me, that became a mechanism. One thing that I heard, though, later after my healing journey was that the addicted child is treated as the black sheep, but yet the addicted child is the only one that is truly portraying where there is deep healing needed for the family.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, or what do you
Oh,
think?
yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I could see it now that you say the shopping. I think I see all of it. I've seen all of it in different people in my family. But it goes back to that inner child that hasn't been able to heal or been able to even process and just they don't want to feel it. So they numb it or they try with shopping. It's never enough trying to fulfill that emptiness inside them or with alcohol and just try not to feel. I think I've done maybe even a little bit of all of them,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you just don't know. I remember when I was going through separation with my husband, I would sit there with a bottle of wine, a knife, a bag of Funyuns, and a bag of chocolates, and I would buy like the little chocolates because I thought, oh, well, it's a little one, you know. But I would just and I would gain weight, and I gained like 15 pounds, and I was like, when did this happen? But I
wow.
mean, it was because I didn't want to feel. It was a depression, it was a sadness, it was, but it all at the same time was rooted in my childhood, causing all these other problems as an adult.
Yeah, yeah, and you're so right. I think I agree with you. And for me, the coping mechanisms changed. Like first it was all alcohol, and that's the way I coped every day. I would have like a bottle of wine every single night. Like I couldn't wait. I wasn't like a day drinker as much, like it didn't get to that severity. At one point there was a couple of years where I was drinking at lunchtime probably, but not, it was always like, I just waited for that 5 o'clock, that gave me
Yeah, yeah.
motivation, to actually have it. And it was a daily habit for me. Every day, a bottle of wine, a bottle of wine. And then when I let go of the wine, um, we were talking about this in Satna this morning, where we were talking about this movie. Seen this movie or heard of the play Wicked? You know how it's big right now?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
I haven't seen it, but
if you go check out the replay on Satna today, we went deep into it because for me, what I realized this weekend, that's why I was like, it's crazy that we're recording this today because I finally realized why the pain. I think we could all say that, yes, it was our childhood trauma, but what did that cause? So the movie Wicked is I'm not gonna say all of it because in case you want to go watch it or whatever, right? But it's the pre-movie to The Wizard of Oz.
oh, okay.
So yeah, so on The Wizard of Oz, there's Glenda and then the Good Witch and all of that. This is the movie that tells the true story of Elphaba, which is the supposedly the Wicked Witch of the West or East, I forget what they call her. But she was green. Her mother had an affair. She was born green. Talk about generational trauma, generational trauma. She was not accepted. She had psychic powers. Glenda was blonde, beautiful. She was kind. Everybody liked her. Society liked her. And this weekend, what I realized was that all my life, and it brought a lot of tears to me this morning, was I lived like Glenda. I basically was not authentically me. I did what society deemed to be success. I had to be the president of everything. I had to own my own real estate company. I had to get approval, but it wasn't just from my parents who couldn't give it to me at that point, especially as children, because they were so depressed themselves, right? It was from society because society tells you, go get the houses, go get the clothes, be kind, right? All this stuff, pretend. That's what we're seeing right now, the veil. And when I realized one of our community members, Diane, she's so wise. She said, I told her I used to be Glenda. And I used to pretend and do all this stuff. And when I took my mask off and I left the real estate industry, when I had healed that addiction to alcohol with Kundalini Yoga and A Course in Miracles, I thought that I was going to feel safe to be authentically me. And Diane says, no, girl, when you take the mask off, that's where the real work begins. Because
Yes.
in this story, Alphaba, who's considered to be this wicked, she actually is the good one. She's misunderstood because of what she looks like, her psychic powers. She cannot be authentically herself in a world that is so sick. And what I
Yes.
realized is that when I took my mask off, when I healed myself from that addiction, for the last 4 years, working on generational healing with other women, I was still afraid to be me. And that's why the pain, which drove other addictions. After I stopped drinking alcohol, I became really, really addicted to cannabis. And it wasn't flower. I don't know how I went from flower to like, what is that stuff called? Um, it's that oil, not that oil that you burn it. Shatter. That's what it is.
No.
Okay, so shatter is like the THC in shatter is so high and so strong. And I believe that cannabis is an incredibly sacred medicinal medicine. I really do. I believe
I do
you
too.
can, you can take away a lot of pharmaceuticals from it, but my relationship to cannabis was not a good one. And I thought once I took my mask off, I was going to be okay. But then I was left vulnerable. I was left, now I'm authentically me. And before, when I was Glenda, everybody used to like everything I posted. Everybody used to like all the things, the cars and the houses, all the stuff that I was showing off because that's what society says is success. And when I finally became authentically me and took that mask off, I didn't get that from people. In fact, they were triggered by me. They were triggered by the things I said, by who does she think she is, healing herself. Look at her now. She thinks she's better than all these other things, right? Family afraid of the Kundalini yoga work that I did, all this stuff. And I realize now, because I saw this play in 2013 when I was going through my biggest, darkest night of the soul. And it made such an impact on my life, but I didn't know why. Now I know why. So I realized that as that mask came off this weekend, right before we were going to do this podcast recording, that's why I was like, wow, Why the pain? The pain has always been because we live in a society, and this is what Gabor Mate, he just recently wrote a book on this. We live in a society that is sick, literally sick, that has standards that are not of true success. Because in this movie, guess what? Alphaba ends up finding true love and true success by being authentically her. And Glenda, the good witch, realizes she's the evil one for always faking it, always not being herself, always going with society and making fun of Alphaba too.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that this weekend, I finally, it came home to me. So when I went through my addiction with alcohol, then came cannabis shatter. Then I was like, wait a second, this is a plant medicine. Like, I have got to change my relationship with this plant medicine. So I struggled for probably another year of just constant use, because when I took the mask off, guess what? I had to deal with all the stuff, like you said, that I hadn't felt. My husband, my mom, me, my children. No longer could I numb myself. So then, because I've worked with Mother Ayahuasca as well, I was like, the relationship needs to change. The plant is not the problem. The alcohol is not the problem. The drugs are not the problem. The food is not the problem. It's my relationship with me.
Yes.
And it finally just came full circle this week where now I understand.
Yeah.
Now I see why the pain. Does this make sense? Like, does it
No,
resonate?
yes, yes. And I see it in myself too with certain things. I grew up, my parents, they were always having parties. They used to, we have family friends that just recently told me they used to call it La Discoteca Mariscal. And I was like, what? Because that's how many parties my mom was always throwing parties. My dad was always very chill. I could always tell my mom liked it more. But it was weird because in my 20s, I did do the drinking. And for whatever reason, I got to a point where my body just rejected it.
Mm,
And it happened not just to me, it happened to my sister. My brother's not a drinker either. Like we don't feel good when we drink. It's weird. Like our I think it's our DNA is finally saying, okay, this needs to stop because there is alcoholism in the family. I think is the DNA is finally like, okay, it needs to stop somewhere. And we're putting like we react, we'll get sick. And it's weird because it happens also to like my kids. They're like, no, it's like my body rejects it. It's weird.
mm,
But I had also the culture. Because I'll
yes,
see it like with his, with Hispanic men, it's like, oh, you gotta drink, you gotta fit in, you gotta, that's what they do.
right.
And then when men try to put a stop to it, it's like, you don't drink? What do you mean you don't drink? You get that kind of that reaction. I have noticed a little bit more where men, they'll be like, really? They're like, wow, like I don't drink a lot, but I don't know if I could completely stop.
Mm,
Which I have to give props because
yeah,
when people could actually do this and become conscious and aware of like, okay, this is something that's causing issues and a problem. But I see it so much with the shopping, like you said, you know, the cannabis. I love cannabis. I think it's a such a sacred plant because it helps so many people with cancer, when they're going through the chemo. It takes away the nauseousness. It gives them an appetite because they need to be able to keep feeding themselves and eat to keep their strength to fight off this disease or whatever it is. But even that disease is rooted in something in their childhood, something, a trauma, you know what I mean? So even that, I could definitely see it, how it helps it, but at the same time, if you haven't dealt with the healing, it's very easy to fall into the addiction, even though it's if let's say you're taking it for healing purposes, how even when you're not feeling sick, you still want to take it because you're like, well, this makes me feel good, because you don't want to deal with it or you don't even know how to deal with it. You're not even aware what's even going on.
yeah.
You just start getting addicted to that feeling good moment.
And that was my situation, because it was, and it was weird because when I stopped drinking and then I didn't smoke for a while, but then I was getting ready to leave the real estate industry. And when I was getting ready to leave the real estate industry, so much fear came up. I mean, literally walking away from a comfortable, 6 figures, and now I got to be myself and I can be myself. So much came up. So as I was leaving the real estate industry, that's when I picked it up. And it wasn't cannabis because I had used cannabis in the past, say like relationship wise safely. It was not like abuse or anything like that, which helped me a lot wean off of alcohol, to be honest with you. And it always for me, I don't know why people stereotype that much because it helped me focus, to be honest with you. It helped me come into my heart more. It helped me sense and feel life more. However, then as I was leaving the real estate industry, all this stuff started coming up and I was like, oh, I needed to just forget. And that's when I started to get into like shatter. And the shatter, we don't have enough study on that yet long term. This is like an extract that they take and the THC levels are way high. So then when I left the real estate industry completely, I remember going to Sedona and I took like 3 days by myself. And I was like, this has got to change. And then I stopped smoking the shatter completely and I started smoking cannabis, the flower. Always aware that, this relationship needed to be rectified. And the reason is because like in my experience with plant medicine and also there's a story of Terrence McKenna, who was this guy who would always talk about plant medicine and mushrooms and he would never respect the plant to the point where he ended up getting a brain tumor of a mushroom in his head. And it's not that the plant was like punishing him, it's just that the plant was trying to give him a message and he did not listen. He just
Yeah.
wanted the visuals and all that. And I know too much about plant medicine for me to not feel the guilt I felt about the abuse that I was doing to her. So then that gradually kind of like I dealt with the guilt. I kept doing my meditation practice, my sadhana. I would always share with you all, I struggle with this, like this is the worst thing that makes me feel shameful, makes me feel, it wasn't because of the plant, it was because of my relationship with the plant always. And it wasn't until this year that I started to slowly, like, I would go a week without it, or I would wean myself out of it, or I would put rules, like I'm not smoking in the day because I have classes in the night and I'm doing it only on the weekend. And that's my goal. My goal is actually to grow the plant and to continue to use it medicinally and ritual as well. Very important because for me, it expands my consciousness. It puts me in my heart. And I've seen some tremendous benefits too, like seizures, like you were talking about seizures,
Yeah.
cancer, food. So, and even alcohol, ladies. Again, this is not like a guilt trip for you all. Oh, I have to stop drinking alcohol or I have to stop overeating. Awareness. And the key here is heal the relationship with yourself, your inner child, so that these substances you can actually enjoy them for what they're for, right? Even our brother Jesus Christ used wine to expand his consciousness or whatever that looks like, right? The key here is what we're talking about is addiction. And it was over the weekend, I had a family member who's struggling a lot with addiction. And I think this is so common right now. I think it was something crazy, like over 200,000 people overdosed on fentanyl in 1 year. In 1 year. And this is like people of all walks of ages. It's not just, oh,
Yes.
hoodlums, right? Or like
I know.
I've seen nurses get addicted to fentanyl. I've seen doctors get addicted to fentanyl. I've seen people with a lot of money and with no money. So the reason I said this is because we have to get away from the shame and the guilt. I had a family member finally come up to me who I always wanted to help because he's been struggling with addiction, but I already know not to intervene unless people ask you for their help, right? And he finally came up to me over like the weekend and Thanksgiving weekend, and he literally he is, and I have always seen him as a very bright person, which no one else sees him that way because they're like he's addicted,
Yeah.
and that's probably why he opened up and he came up to me and he says, you know about energy. Can we talk about energy? And I was like, what? Like, he was so eloquent and so bright. And he's like, I just need something to help me be myself.
Oh,
It was the most beautiful and divine intervention. I still cry over it because it was just like, I can't believe God can be this great. And we talked, and the one thing that I told him is never feel shameful or guilty. We all deal with life, cope in very many different ways. And the thing that he said that stood out was like, I just hate myself for this. I hate myself for this. And if the people around him are also telling him, because when I was addicted to alcohol, I was so guilty about it that, of course, my mom would make me feel like shit.
Yeah.
My mom, she would like call me out every single time, thinking that she was helping me when it was literally driving me more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when he came up to me over the weekend, I was like, baby, nothing for you to be ashamed of, nothing for you to feel guilty. Other people deal with life in many different ways. Once we can clear that part off, the rest is going to fall into place. And he even, through that conversation, welcomed me. He says, yes, I want to practice meditation and I want you to check in with me every day. And I literally felt like the heavens were opening, because to me, that was the invitation for someone to finally invite God into their life and to release themselves from the shame and the guilt. And I don't know, would you agree that that is the biggest problem in addiction?
Yes, I even with other stuff, people, it's so easy for us to just point the finger and judge, especially family, unfortunately. And instead of like what's going on, instead of speaking up and asking what is going on, what are you feeling, why do you feel this way, and really addressing the issues behind everything. Because I think to some extent we don't realize it. I think we all do it. We just don't realize how, because I remember in my 20s, I mean, I was in my 20s, I would go out. I remember there was a time that I couldn't go to sleep. I was extremely tired, but I couldn't go to sleep and I wanted a shot.
Mm,
And my hand was shaking. And then when I saw that, I was like, no, I'm not going to take the shot. I need to go be able to go to sleep without taking a shot. And for whatever reason, later my body just didn't take long. My body in my early 20s just started rejecting it, you know? And but it's weird, but I've have gone through other stuff where you start eating junk food or you don't eat healthy or you don't the chocolate or the sugar. Like my one of my daughters, she loves sugar, you know, and it's but it goes back to the same thing and the judgment. And many times people don't even come around or ask for help because well, they're going to judge me anyways, you know, until you finally start, you know, I think God is so important because
yes.
I do have family who tell me they're like, I go out, everybody's drinking or everybody's smoking, or everybody's doing something. And I'm just like, I have my water. And I just start thinking, God, 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 God. And I'm like, He saved me, like He's testing me right now, you know? And I think it's beautiful that we're reverting back to Him. And it's beautiful that they came and they ask you for help. Because a lot of times you they want to go to somebody, they just don't know how. They don't know. It's like we go back to we only know what we know. We only know what we saw. So it's hard to actually find that who am I gonna go to? This is people, it's so sad because a lot of times I see it where people they're like, well, you know, she smokes weed all the time. I'm like, you've been drinking alcohol all your life. You've been an alcoholic. What do you mean? You know, you're judging this other person. Like, why don't we try healing what is going on here that's being passed down generation by generation? You
Right.
know, they just because alcohol it has been, you know, normalized for so long, think, oh, well, it's normal. It's not against the law. But then cannabis, and, you know, it just like everything, it has its purpose. You know, if you're sick through your throat, I'll take a shot and I'm like, oh, it completely clears everything out, the congestion, everything.
Right.
But it's like it's the plant too, the marijuana. It's a beautiful plant that it's so many medicinal things to it, you know. But unfortunately, we abuse it. Just like things, we have things, we buy things to decorate our house, whatever. But then I see how some people it's never enough. It's never enough. They're constantly ordering. Now it's so easier. Now you just order it and it gets delivered to your house, you
Yeah, they're making our addictions way easier
know?
but that whole thing, it's that whole thing, it's the abuse part has to do with the trauma.
Yeah.
That's what people need to understand. And I love how you said about God. That was the one thing that I drove in my family members' conversation. I said, honey, sometimes these things are so huge that we have to call upon God. he was asking me, how long do I have to do this meditation? I was like, just 8 weeks. Let's clear the PTSD. He's like all excited because of that. But then when I was talking to him about God, he had like this blank look on his face. And I told him, honey, God loves you. That's the whole thing. When we're in addiction, we have so much shame and guilt that we don't think God loves us. And of course, we're not going to ask for help from a higher power, because what's the point? And why is that? Well, let's talk about the brain. Okay. So, first of all, when you go through generational trauma as a child, whether it's physical abuse, all this other abuse that happens as children, right? The most horrific types, SA abuse, all that stuff, your brain becomes impacted. Okay. So, the brain, uh, Jogi Bhajan would always say that addiction is the pineal gland and the pituitary gland not communicating. That's all it is. So when we have trauma, we have a lot of emotions and thoughts. We're afraid, we're angry, we're frustrated. That causes a disconnection between these two to communicate, which then we become addicted to something to cope with this disconnection, right? And it's so freaking ironic, because then you develop coping mechanisms. And if you're developing coping mechanisms of addiction to drugs or alcohol, like I was, your brain is getting more damaged. So that was what I was trying to explain to him. Especially the drugs today out there, it's an instant addiction. Like your brain collapses and needs it, like it needs breath. So you're not weak. These drugs were made this way. Fentanyl, especially that, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to allowed to say that word, because sometimes they block us for that. So I'll call it the F word. It was created by pharmaceutical
Yes.
family, a family who knew that this would happen. And then they also developed the cure, another pill.
Yeah.
So they knew this was going to happen. And then they developed something to save people. Okay. So people's brains are not well already from childhood. Then they go into addiction with alcohol and or drugs that cause more damage to the brain. So of course our relationship with God is not going to be there. It's only going to get worse and worse and worse. This is why we have to take a spiritual approach, a holistic approach of, we have got to work with the brain, neuroplasticity. That's what ended up happening with me, because the reason I was able to drop alcohol was because I was doing the addiction meditation, which, by the way, the addiction meditation is here on my YouTube channel. If anybody wants to go find it, just 3 minutes per day. My brain started to communicate with each other again. My nervous system started to regulate itself. So I was like, oh my God, I don't need that wine today. I feel safe. I feel good. So then I remember I made that commitment. I'm no longer gonna drink alcohol. And I like moved through it for a couple of weeks. And then like a few weeks later, I was like, oh shit, I'm feeling all this stuff that I haven't felt in how many years and lifetimes. This is horrific. I was having conversations with people that I needed to have had for a long ass time. I can't handle this. I can't handle this. That's when I went straight. And it was, the flour wasn't enough. It was like the shatter, right? Like I needed something, right? Then I moved through my practice. I moved through my practice. The brain started getting healthier. I left the shatter. The cannabis, the flower was actually helping me a lot when I got into that. I was using also the oil. That helped me so much to just find moments of equanimity as I was feeling and purging all these things. Brain started getting healthier, nervous starts getting healthier. I'm here now today. Where before it was like I had to do it all day, every day. Now it's like, okay, I'm very conscious about the relationship. I enjoy it. I love it. I love the way it makes me feel. I feel like it does help me with creativity in my heart. I feel like it helps me process things. Like, especially like when I go away, even on a trip, I won't smoke obviously when I'm traveling or whatever. And then I come back and I'll smoke, and all of a sudden it's like everything makes sense. Everything starts to fall into place. But the whole thing is that it's been a journey of healing the nervous system, of rewiring the brain, of through that doing what you just said, which is my relationship with God, and
Yes.
doing what Alphaba has done. She's not the wicked one. Being authentically you. And that's another thing. I really do believe that a lot of people that are addicted not only have generational childhood trauma, but they're also the black sheep because they have psychic powers. My family member that came up to me that I didn't even know, he was talking about energy. He was talking about his gifts and I could see them. My son was like, he is so tapped in, mom. I never talked to him like this before. He sees things, the spirit world. And I explained to him, honey, a lot of it, yeah, you open yourself as a channel when you do these drugs like that, especially, but you can also learn to channel that energy to protect you. So, yeah, it's like a freaking hurricane because it's like the childhood trauma. Then they're the black sheep who also have psychic powers and gifts. That's why maybe you stopped drinking alcohol too, because it was like you have all of these gifts, Elvira, and the alcohol was like, no more, you can't handle this. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, because my body definitely rejects it. I could drink it now. I don't because my husband, he gave up drinking. So I feel it's kind of, am I gonna have a beer when but
Yes.
I could have like a beer or two with dinner and I'm okay.
Yeah.
But for me to just go at it, I cannot. My body completely rejects it. Right now, how you were saying how the pharmaceuticals, how they made the F. I saw the whole documentary on it. And they do it with everything. They do it with our foods. You know what I mean? Just even social media, the promotions of constantly Amazon and all since last week, the text on my phone about all the sales going on hasn't, it's constantly like a text, and then literally 10 minutes later, it's the same company. I'm like, you just texted me. Like, what are you're texting me again? Like, calm down. It doesn't stop, just constantly the emails, the commercials, the ads, everything is shopping. Right now, when you're saying how I watched the show, there's a show from, it's called 1923. And it's about this girl that's coming, her family's coming in, migrating from, I think it's Scotland. They migrated, they were in Tennessee, they're migrating west in the whole journey of the Wild West.
Mhm.
And how I just connected so much with it because she feels everything. And I think that's one of my gifts where I just feel everything so intensely. And my daughter's the same way. So I think when I was younger, because the whole alcoholism in the family, when it came to me, my body was just like, no. But at the same time, I didn't know how to manage my feelings, all these emotions that I would shut them down, I think, and I wouldn't let myself feel. So it would make my body just very rigid because I didn't know how to manage all these feelings that I was constantly just feeling everything. I could connect with people from heart to heart. You tell me a story or you telling me your childhood something, I will feel it. I'm watching a movie, whatever they're trying to narrate, I feel it so intensely. So I think right now when you were telling me about your relative, they're very sensitive. And a lot of times we don't know how to manage that. So we like the numbing helps or the addictions help. Thank God I never really went into that deeply, but I think they've come up in other ways, like trying to be excessively organized or excessively clean or excessively. I'm an overthinker. So that's an issue where I feel it's an addiction. Because I got an aha moment right now when you're saying that's mine where I need to be able to control it because I'm an extremely overthinker. My mind goes 0 to 100 really fast. And I'll go into the future, not tomorrow. And that I feel that's to a certain extent, that's an addiction too. Because we don't know how to manage it. We don't know how to manage all these feelings that are coming up or whatever it is we're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah, a 1000% relate to. And I think you probably were more aware of being an empath, where I was not. I just thought I'm weird. You know what I mean? Like, because even my mom just barely, like 3 weeks ago, said, I feel everything, what you just said. And she was psychic. When I was thinking of doing something, she already knew that I was going to go do that. And she is always like feeling people out. And she doesn't have a lot of trust in a lot of people because I feel like she sees, you know what I mean? Like she sees, like we were even talking about Santa Claus, and she's like, no, no, no. Esos son unos pervertidos. Those are perverts. Don't ever your kids to Santa Claus. And I was like, you know what? I agree with you, mom, because
Wow.
that
Yeah.
is kind of scary. But she's always been like that, and she just didn't know how to channel it, right? And for her, it kind of made her very angry and very, very frustrated with herself too.
Yeah.
For me, it was like I didn't even know. My two sisters carry, I think, also that as well, and my brother does too. He's a Scorpio, but he's more quiet about it. Like males are different,
Right.
everything you said about males is very sad. So proud of your husband for being able to stop the drinking because my husband really wants to stop drinking, but when we come around family, it's like it's like everyone's
Yeah.
drinking. You know what I mean? But he never had like the problem that I did like every day. Like, he was more like a weekend social person. In fact, when he met me, he didn't even drink. It was I made him start drinking. With you. So it is that a feeling and him, my family member that came to me and started talking to me about that. I was like, you just need to learn to channel the energy. And one of the things that we were working on this month at Satori is the radiant body. And it's so funny you say that because last month I went to my Kundalini Yoga therapist class on origins and identity. And one of the things we were working on is the radiant body and we're working on this month. The radiant body is one of the 10 energetic bodies. And that radiant body is your regal self. You know who you are. You sat with your shadow, with your light, right? But it's a shield. And what it does is that it protects you from entangling yourself in other people's karma. So the whole training was about us learning to sit with people in their suffering and not take it on.
Hmm.
So in Kundalini Yoga, it's this strong, radiant body that allows you to do that. So because I had just gone to school, we're working on this month, the first thing that came to me was like, he needs a radiant body meditation because he feels everything and he sees things. I mean, to the point where he sleeps with the light on at nighttime because of the terrors, the night stuff that he sees. So I was like, okay, he needs protection at his crown. He needs a stronger radiant body so that unfortunately his environment, it can be very chaotic. And that's the whole problem. Ladies, as much as you don't want to hear this, if you want your children to heal from addiction, you have to heal. Because even if he were to heal with me, he has to keep going back to the same environment with his mother and with the people around him that is very negative. It was same thing for me. I had to constantly go back to that same environment with my mom, who used to make me feel guilty, where to the point when I started healing, I had to separate myself for a while. I had to literally, because I wasn't strong enough to sustain that. And thankfully, I wasn't living there anymore or anything. Unfortunately, with him, he's still in that environment, which I just hope to God that mom realizes how much she is also part of the problem. And
Yeah.
she might even be listening to this. And this is not to accuse you. This is not to, I was there. I was the addicted mother. I was the mother who was not present. And just because you're not addicted to alcohol or to drugs doesn't mean that you're present with your children. And if the child has an addiction the way I did, parents have to take accountability and responsibility because they have an addiction for a reason. Don't you
Yes.
think?
Yes. No, I definitely see it. I know, um, for my husband, I'm so incredibly proud of him, but I know exactly where it comes from. I see it clearly. Right now, when you're saying about um your relative, I remember I'm relating to him a lot right now because I know as when before I was aware of how sensitive I was, or I didn't know how to I didn't know what was going on, I think, because there were times where I was very happy
Mhm.
and then I would go to a party, a gathering, something, and by the time I'm driving, I would start shutting down. I didn't know what was happening. I would just, it was too much of I was feeling from everybody that I didn't know how to navigate it. I didn't know what was me, what was my feelings and what was other people's feelings. And I didn't know because I wasn't being true to myself. I didn't know who I was anymore because I was trying to be a people pleaser and be everything I thought everybody else wanted me to be. So I was so disconnected from me. So when I came around other people, that it was so overwhelming. By the time I'm driving home, I'm just crying because
Mhm.
there were so many emotions because I could connect with people heart to heart, but it just, I was so lost that I didn't even know who I was, that I couldn't manage being around other people because it would just throw me off completely. But it does go back to, I know my mom, unfortunately, I think she doesn't understand it. She'll be like, oh, you exaggerate all the time. I exaggerate, I exaggerate. I'm like, no, this is how I'm feeling. Like this is, and I think that's also can cause a lot of more issues where your feelings are not being validated. If people are telling you, your loved ones, if they, like I said, people tell me, oh, you're such a good mom. I'm like, talk to my kids. Because there's times they tell me, remember when mommy was yelling at us because we were doing our homework? They never forget. I was teaching my son his math homework and I was obsessed with this is the right answer. And then later I'm like, oh no, you're right. And then remember how mommy got it? She was like so like obsessed and like this is the way it is. And then it turned out that I was wrong. But you know what I mean? It's just we have to validate what is actually happening, and we all have different perspectives of how we're feeling. And we need to be able to give people that, just let them speak, hear them out. And sometimes it's hard. Like I said, there were times in our coaching calls where I would get feedback from you and the other women in the community. At that moment, I felt I was being attacked,
Absolutely.
that you guys were being mean to me. Thank God, like I said, you record them, that I would always listen to the replay. Like they were not being mean to me at all. It's just it's very hard to get that feedback at that moment to get, because you feel you're being judged. But a lot of times that's what we need. We need to hear what it is that sometimes we're doing to cause, unfortunately, our children or something, those addictions, and then they just continue because nobody's listening to anybody. Nobody's becoming aware. Like I said, many times I would blame my husband.
Right.
And maybe that, besides his childhood, I'm over here with my inner stuff, pushing him to drink even more because, like, I'm trying to have a relationship with you, a marriage, we have kids, and I'm over here causing all these other problems.
Right.
Where it's actually pushing him to, like, well, what's the point? I'm just going to drink.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk to you. You know, it's all related. And unfortunately, we need to, again, just take the time to listen to actually each other, what's actually happening. And hopefully, like you said, a lot of times we need to disconnect from everybody around. And hopefully he could do that where he could just focus on himself, the meditation, and just feeling what it is he's actually feeling and going back to who is he really?
Right.
Who does he want to, who is he now? Who has he obviously he needs to learn who he has been in the past, who he is now, and who he wants to continue to be,
Yeah.
and what he has to do. And a lot of times you ask God, put the people in front of me that need to guide me to where I need to go to become that person I'm meant to be. And they'll come. They will come. Once you believe 100%, they will come.
Yeah.
He will put you in front of them.
And even in there, that's God, because for someone to, like, even for me to wake up in the middle of the addiction and say, I want to see things differently, it didn't come from my mom's yelling. It didn't come from my mom's making me feel guilty. It came from divine intervention. Something inside of me said, it's time. It is time for you. And I do believe that that will happen. And and I'm not trying to shift blame or anything, but I think we need
Yeah.
to be honest. And we need to be honest. And when I began my healing journey, my children struggled a lot. I didn't know. I mean, they were not like rebellious as much, but I remember my son in eighth grade. My oldest, was like the kindest soul in the world, but he went through like a little spurt where he was fighting like people in junior high. The youngest never really like, he just was like wild, like just didn't do like anything bad, but he was crying out for attention,
Yeah, yeah.
from me. And and that's why when I took the mask off, like I told you, and I stopped drinking, that's when the shit hit the fan. That's when I was like, my children are struggling with their nervous system. Some people might call it mental health because of me. And that was not easy. So if you
No, it's not.
have a daughter or a son who is addicted, and I have seen some amazing mothers, amazing. I know two mothers actually, two mothers that are exemplary mothers. exemplary mothers, and yet both of their sons are stuck in cycles of addiction, and they are so kind. But what I see from both of them is there's guilt that drives that kindness. So, when you feel guilty because your kids went through some shit and then you give them everything because you feel guilty, that is not good either.
Yeah.
And and that's why I'm saying there's no one worse mother than the other, whether you're the overgiver because of what your kid went through and you weren't part of it. How many kids get abused and it wasn't, the mom who did it or the dad, right? They took them to a party and some shit went down or something like that. It's more common than we think. And that's hard for a mother, right? Like, what could I have done to prevent this? There's a lot of things that my boys went through that I couldn't physically been there, right? Like the bullying in school and all of that stuff, right? However, if I would have been more present, if I would have healed and took care of myself, I could have been there to sense when they needed me more. Or I could have come from a place of not guilt and instead of place of what they needed me to be, which was their guide. And so this is not to make you feel worse. This is for you to realize that if you do also have a child that is in deep addiction in some way, shape, or another, that judging them, lecturing them, making them feel worse is not going to help. And what you need to really do as a mother is heal yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you heal yourself, my children healed, my
Yes.
husband healed. My
Yes.
kid and my dad now, like he's in a situation where he can't even drink anymore. I think this is what's happening. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. We're all going in this
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad was always a chill drinker.
Same.
1 or 2 beers when he would come home. Very chill. He would take forever to finish a beer. Very chill. But again, he got sick 9 years ago and then he couldn't drink anymore.
I
And I
see.
think the healing journey as well, I could say when I started the healing journey, even though we were still going through a very difficult time in my marriage, and he saw that I couldn't do it anymore, unfortunately, because it's at least I think everybody does, but my husband, it would get to he would cross a certain line where it was very toxic, where it's like, I don't like the person you are, and they don't realize it, unfortunately. But I think he was like, okay, fine, something has to change. And I think even to stop drinking, it has helped them see. I don't know if he realizes 100% how it would affect the kids or even me, but I think he sees now with a more clear mind
Mm,
where he could process and actually feel. You know what I mean?
right, right, right.
Feel what is actually happening, what he's gone through, what he's in, and then to see what he actually wants for
Mhm,
his life, for his kids, to keep his family together. And again, it goes back to, like I said, my kids are not big drinkers, and I think that's another one where it helps to see, okay, if you're I have to say, I really hope to God that because of the work that we're doing, that is helping our kids to be like, okay, this is not the life that I want. This is not the road that I want to go down with, because I already see what it's done to my parents or my grandparents or my aunts, uncles, family, cousins, whatever. It's just the awareness. Like I said, nobody's judging anybody. Like you said, it's just that's part of the healing journey to help everybody around heal as well. We all have to do it together. It can't just be one. I know my mom, when I started with the practice Kundalini and the meditation, and it's like, oh yeah, go, síguele, do it. And it's like, whoa, let's do it all together. It can't be, I'm hoping to some extent it does correlate to them as well. But we do, if we're aware of it, we have to do the work. If we want to see the changes, everybody has to do their part.
They really do. And I think that if you're doing it from a place of focusing on healing yourself, they eventually do gravitate towards it. And
Yeah.
then sometimes, for me, like my grandmother who transitioned a couple of years ago, uh, right at the end, I remember she finally told my mom that she loved her, and that's something that never had occurred to me that was healing.
Mm, yeah.
And sometimes it even happens after death. I've received messages from ancestors in the ethers where there's a lot of peace, and that can happen a lot in our meditation practices and all of that. But I think it goes back to what I was saying with about the radiant body too, that the more that I healed and I activated these bodies, the more the guilt cleared itself, and the more that I stood in my conviction. So now my children can't have an excuse of what it is that's going through their life and say it's because of you, mom. Because yeah, I used to be like that, but I've
Yeah.
changed completely. So now I have like this confidence, where it's like, first of all, I don't feel sorry for you, because no kid needs to be felt sorry for at all. No child. Like that is like you're basically building a weak mother or daughter or son or daughter if you're doing that. And because the guilt will make us do that. So not only that, but I'm very much more able to let them move through their own soul journey, right? Instead of trying to like fix things for them. And like I used to be like a savior, like I'm just gonna save you and protect you. And now I trust their soul journey, which really if we do that as parents since they're little, God, that teaches them confidence, that we think we're helping them by saving them. We think we're helping them by doing all this thing. And then it comes from guilt because we don't feel like we're good enough parents because we're addicted to whatever, right? But the truth is that they have their own soul journey. And what I've learned to do now is trust that soul journey for them, trust them, give them that empowerment to now make the decisions that they need to make in their life. And you could do this with a 4-year-old and the same thing with a 26-year-old or whatever you have, right? But that goes back to the taking accountability and the refocus on the only things we can do, which is healing ourselves. And
Yeah.
I know for me, the hardest part was the shame and the guilt. That's
Yeah.
the hardest part, because not only did I have to like face it, but then I had to live it. Like I had to, I remember when I first stopped drinking, there were little things that my mom would say, or even my sister would be like, remember when you used to do this? And I would get really upset inside. I would be like, "Ugh," like all angry. Now, like I'll hear the stories or something, and I'll be like, that was a good time. Because I was a really fun like drinking person. My dad he over drinks. Like when he does start drinking, that's where I got it from. Like he can't stop, but he never got angry. He was just like a good time. And most of the time I was like that. But towards the end, it started getting really, really bad. Like it was just my pain body, my pain body, my
Yeah.
pain. So yeah, I totally agree with you. But by the same to and at this by and the same token, I feel like this is just such a journey of looking at addiction as, instead of an addiction, calling it a coping mechanism. That's
Yeah.
all we're doing. Once you can establish the fact that you have a coping mechanism because you're dealing with life this way, then that's where I feel that the compassion really starts to come in for yourself, where you're like willing to see things differently, where God can finally intervene and help you. Because I don't know, what do you think? Don't you think that with addiction, like God has to be present?
Yeah, like you said, it's a coping mechanism, and it's a cry for help,
There you go.
and we don't even realize what is happening many times, and it's happened to all of us one way or another. The overthinker, constantly having to have everything organized, or trying to fix everything for everyone because of that guilt that you feel. I think that can even also be an addiction to some extent, because you're just always trying to be there for everybody and save everybody, you know? And it's unfortunate. The radiant with a JLA, is that part of the radiant?
Yeah, how did you know? Yeah.
Because I asked you, because in the beginning of the year I started trying to meet with clients one
Uh-huh.
on one, just to past clients, just to reconnect with them. And it was very draining for me. And I
Uh,
remember I asked you, and you're like, go back to the a JLA, which I love. It's like I said, I can't even explain how stuff happens. I remember there was a time I was driving and I was very upset. And I know a JLA is usually, it's like because I know it by memory. It's when I look at the translation, it's very beautiful. but it's a lot of what I read into it was a lot of times like soldiers would chant it to get the courage that they needed to go into war.
Mhm.
So I was very upset, but it calls you to come back to yourself, to your body. And I was very upset and I was driving, and on the license plate it says Ajay Ale. And I'm like, how is that even written in the license plate? You know what I mean? Like how? Like I've never, if I didn't know the word, it would just be like, oh, well, I don't know what that means. But I'm like, how is it that I'm upset and I'm telling myself, okay, I need to come back to myself. I need to me, that's God talking to me. Come back to yourself, calm down. No need to be angry. I'm here. Just just call upon me. Pretty much that's what he was telling me.
Yep.
So it's yeah, I do that. That's part of my sadhana. I won't stop doing it anymore because I need to always remember to come back to me and really connect it to him.
Right. And also just not get entangled in other people's karma.
Yeah, yeah. Knowing the difference of what's mine, that's I had to be very aware of that. What is mine and what is other people's, and not I could feel it, but not take it with me for the rest of the day or for the rest of the week or for days,
Yeah.
to knowing what's mine and what's theirs and respecting it.
Yeah. Because I think people like women especially, and women have the highest levels of immune system issues, immune diseases, and even cancer. And what is the number one thing? You take care of other people instead of yourself. That's like Glenda the witch from Wizard of Oz. She always has to be kind. She always has to be dressed proper. Her hair has to be in place. She can't be herself. And she always has to go save people. That is what gets you sick, like
Yeah.
completely, all of us. But why do we do that? I did that all the time. I took on projects left and right. Are you kidding me? My husband was my project, my kids were my project, my clients were my project, everybody was my project because I wanted to avoid what was happening inside of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we disguise it like Linda, oh, we're being so kind. We're so nice to everybody when you are literally betraying yourself and completely abandoning yourself. Why? Because it goes back to what we were talking about last week, the inner child. So it's all like connected.
Oh yeah.
Everything's connected. And my only wish for society and the world, I think that Dr. Gabor Mate is doing an amazing job about this, is to look at addiction as what it is. It's a coping mechanism or some kind of trauma in your life.
Yes.
If we could change that definition, I think it would alleviate so many people where they would be willing to see things differently. And then the approach of healing has got to change. We've got to address the nervous system. We have to address the brain, which is totally, we can reshape it and reformat it, neuroplasticity, right? How long is it going to take? It depends on many different things, right? We've all been through different levels of trauma. When did the trauma happen? Did it happen earlier in the ages versus later? Were your parents around? Did they see you? There's so many factors, right? That's why there's no actual timeline. But what I do know to be true is that we can heal from anything, and especially when it comes to addiction. But it does start with you being compassionate with yourself enough to say, you know what? It's a coping mechanism. It's not serving me anymore. Because there's nothing wrong with shopping. It's the abuse of shopping, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with cannabis. It's the abuse of the cannabis. There's nothing wrong with drinking alcohol even. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's probably a lot of wrong things with doing other worse drugs because they get you addicted immediately.
Yeah.
Like for some reason though, like I knew that I had like addictive personality, so I never ventured into other drugs. It's weird because you would think that I would go deeper into them, but no way. Like even I would never even hang around people that would do stuff like other stuff. Like I've never done like hard drugs or anything like that. You know what I mean? Because I knew that I had such an addictive personality. I was like, no way. I'll be the first one on the streets to do that, right? But if you are doing the harder drugs, even that is healable. Even the real the C word and all those other things that exist out there right now, which I heard that it's more common than ever to like just do that in the morning. But no judgment. Again, look, it's awareness. This is my coping mechanism. Now I'm going to see things differently.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
what would be your last thoughts and maybe some words of encouragement for anybody who might be going through something like this?
I think like you said, there has to be a root for it. So becoming aware of why, what are you not trying to feel? What are you not trying to deal with? And obviously that is the thing that needs to be addressed. And it gets better.
Yes.
You choose either to live in that and go through the difficult process of healing because it's not going to be easy, but it's so much better on the healing journey than it is to stay stuck in those old ways that's been passed down generation to generation. And unfortunately, we're also dealing with stuff that we didn't even go through ourselves that is being passed down. So it's getting very heavy. I think a lot of people, I think that's why the addiction's so big because we're not dealing with it. We're not looking at it. And unfortunately, too, the pharmaceuticals, like the F1, it's fabricated. They knew how strong it was, and they still did it anyways. They didn't care. It was all about the money. And we're just feeding into this. Again, even the cereals, the food, there's a lot of foods that there's ingredients and the chips and everything. They talked about it in church where there's so many ingredients that it addicts you to keep wanting to eat more of the chips, more of the whatever. And it's we need to start fighting for ourselves, for humanity, because it's insane. I'm like, they're trying to kill us.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, I heard that about the chips, about even Doritos. I
Yeah.
grew up with Doritos. I love Doritos. That's the one thing I don't keep in my house because I will eat the whole bag. But I guess even the way the shape is and the ripples, like all of that is a way for you to.
Everything, the chocolates, I think everything has something where you're like, I want more and I want more. You can't just stop. Can't stop.
Yeah, and social media is another thing. I'm glad that you brought that up because it's so easy to get addicted to scrolling. Even me that I do my practice, I've had to put limits on TikTok. I'm less on Instagram now, on Facebook. It's probably because of that. Because on TikTok, my husband's like, you need to let your brain rest because I'm always learning something. I'm not like listening, I'm not like watching like, although I do get into the cheese man sometimes too. That's a lot. You know what I mean? But I'm always needing to be listening to something that is affecting the brain.
Yeah.
And I started to realize I was having higher levels of anxiety because I'd be working and I'd be listening to TikTok the entire time, or I'd be listening to YouTube. It's like there's never a rest there.
Yeah.
So we have different threats and challenges in this modern society that will cause us to become more easily addicted. It doesn't mean that you're more at danger. It just means you need to be more aware of the preventive medicine practices. So the meditation is not just for when you're sick, it's every day preventing for the brain to become so disfigured. I mean, that's what's happening. There's this study that showed that a doctor was saying that if you allow your, especially child between 0 to 7, to use the phone, the tablet, it's like giving them vodka. That's what it does to their brain because it's still developing, and now
Yeah.
you're giving them all this information that they're consuming. So that's why we have higher levels of anxiety, and then we have to deal with the anxiety. So that's why we have higher levels of addiction. And if you were someone who has a lot of generational trauma, it's so easy to put you in this like wheel of just like brain constant fatigue, nervous system dysregulation. So I'm gonna drink the energy drinks, and then I'm gonna eat the foods that are low vibration, and then I'm gonna get into the toxic relationship, and then it's like that's how I used to live my life. It was just
Yeah.
always like
Yeah.
so we understand and we're compassionate about the fact that there are bigger threats now, and I totally agree with you on that. But by the same token, we also have access to much more information and knowledge than our ancestors did. We have access to these holistic approaches. Plant medicine is huge right now. There's a huge renaissance around it that can help you with that. Marijuana, cannabis being one of those plant medicines that can assist you tremendously. Overall, deal with the pain. If you deal with the pain, you will not have issues with addiction. You will have a great relationship with whatever it is you want to enjoy in life. That problem is not the substance or whatever you're liking to enjoy. The problem is the relationship we have with ourselves that then creates the abuse, that then creates the coping mechanisms. So yes, I agree with you 1,000%. And I know I mentioned to you that this subject, it used to put me in complete tears because I felt so so much stuff still come up. Now sharing this with all of you and with you holding space for me, I just want to thank you for that as well. I want to thank you for allowing me to reflect myself in you and the things that you said today. And I just want to offer a ton of hope for people, whether you're going through the addiction, our audience, whether it's a parent that has dealing with someone that is also going through addiction. Not only is it healable, but it starts with compassion. And it starts with you realizing that it is simply a coping mechanism that we can work through if we deal with the pain.
Yes.
Ah, thank you, thank you, thank you. And for any of you that are interested, there is an addiction meditation here on my channel that you can go check out. Also, every Wednesday in our free private Facebook group community, this Sovereign Sisterhood Movement, I do a free live healing session. We're going to go and work with this meditation on Wednesday. So if you want to join us there, I'm going to link it below here in the description. You can also join us there to begin your generational healing journey. Any other last words, Elvira?
No, I think just like with everything else, just becoming aware with our feelings, taking the time to sit and just feel what it is that's going on and to be able to address it, because a lot of times we're not even aware. We're going through our day that we don't take the time of, why am I angry? Why am I upset right now? What is going on? Why am I eating right now? You know? Why am I scrolling like 10 minutes, 30 minutes pass in an instant? You're scrolling on the phone. Why do I want to be disconnected right now? There are just so many reasons that it's coming at us in different ways. Why am I overthinking? Which is one thing that I do that I need to take control of, the overthinking.
Yeah, I think we have such an addictive pattern to that for sure. But it's the awareness, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with you 1000%. Work with your nervous system and your brain, and the rest is going to fall into place. And it doesn't have to be that complicated. It's the simple 3-minute meditation per day that can get you started. Consistency is key, 40 days straight. And like I said, I'll link that meditation here in our description, and you can find it anywhere in my YouTube channel as well. So thank you, Elvira. As we now conclude, I just want everyone to remember that the power to disrupt generational cycles lies within all of us. Breaking the cycle of addiction is not just about personal freedom. Think about it. It's about rewriting your entire ancestral destiny because you're dealing with the pain. Each step that you take towards healing creates ripples of transformation for your family line and beyond. And so together, we are the torchbearers of a new legacy. Thank you for being part of this sacred journey. Until next time, keep shining your light, reclaim your sovereignty. We'll see you in the next one. Satnam.